Between December 1947 and 1949, 750,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homes. After this first chapter of the Nakba, Zionists occupied 78% of Palestinian land. Many of the Palestinians displaced found themselves in Gaza and the West Bank and Lebanon, their families, many of them, remaining there today. Other Palestinians are in diaspora all around the world, including Northeast Ohio and our beautiful city of Akron. The Nakba is ongoing. It never ended. In fact, we are witnessing perhaps its most cruel turn. The Gaza genocide has claimed over 53,000 innocent lives and has internally displaced over 1.9 million Palestinians. The Nakba continues in the West Bank, where the last year and a half have seen nearly 6,000 acres of Palestinian land illegally annexed. We must do all we can to carry this banner forward. All Palestinian refugees under international law have the right of return. But to one day see this right fulfilled, we must all play a part in ensuring justice prevails and that these stories are told. As the first Israeli prime minister and late genocidaire said, as David Ben-Gurion said, we must do everything to ensure that they, the Palestinians, never do return. The old will die and the young will forget. Will we forget? No. That's right. Folks, I can give you numbers, I can show you the maps, but no words can describe the blood, the tears. No words can heal a broken heart. No analysis can depict what a family looks like being torn apart. The Palestinian experience needs to be told by Palestinians. Our next program item is titled Palestine's Plight in Poetry. For in my true belief, poetry is one of the deepest ways to connect with the human heart. We are honored to have two Palestinian poets with us today. So first, I would like to invite to the stage Malak Abu Hashim, an organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement and with SJP at Cornell University. Please give her a warm welcome.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm actually an engineer, I'm not a poet, but this is my first poem. I hope you guys enjoy it. I'll tell you a little bit about it. I wrote it about how I felt as Nakba approached and we were witnessing a genocide in Gaza. Something that's been very important to me for a very long time. I grew up with a family in Gaza. I'm Palestinian, and so this has been an issue that has been deeply important to me since I was a child. So that's kind of the inspiration between this spoken word or poem. Bismillah. When I think about the Nakba, I think about my Sido, my kind-hearted Sido, the one who brought home watermelon after long shifts, who smelled of earth and olive trees, who was born a refugee beneath the branches of exile, not in Yibna like his siblings, but in the shadow of flight, in the arms of a fleeing mother running from gunfire. His childhood was tents of plastic and waiting in lines for rations, grain, wheat, powdered milk. He told me of raids, Israeli soldiers storming refugee camps, stealing books, looting jewelry, desecrating food. I used to wonder, how could this have happened? Was there no one who could have stopped it? Did they not know? Was there the lack of language, of cameras, of reach? But I look at the genocide in Gaza now, and I know it wasn't the eyes that were blind, it was the hearts. The Nakba is not a moment in the past. It is a wound that never healed. It is living grief, a cycle of violence and dispossession, playing out now in Gaza and the West Bank. What language does a grieving mother cry in when she claws through rubble to find her children's bodies? How many orphans have we watched try to comprehend that everyone they loved is gone? Every day, the images from Gaza grow heavier. The voice recording of Hind Rajab as she begs to be saved. The video of the paramedic apologizing to his mother before being murdered. The journalists who have been hunted, killed, and burned alive for sharing the truth. The atrocities I grew up hearing about in the Nakba are the reality in Gaza today. Once again, my family has been subjected to refugee camps as they wait for hours to get clean water. We see camps burn under the bombs of Israeli drones. The images that haunted my Sido's childhood are there for him to witness again, not in his nightmares, but in the current situation for his family in Gaza. And in the midst of it all, we're expected to be functioning members of society. While an entire population is being starved, we're supposed to go to class, finish assignments, as if every university in Gaza has been reduced to ash. My life moves forward while my family in Gaza fights to survive. I don't know how else to describe this feeling of watching a genocide unfold. I think the professionals would call it survivor's guilt or generational trauma, but I know it as this deep pit in my soul that lives with me every single day. Every day another refugee camp is bombed, the pit grows deeper and heavier until I feel like I'm drowning in grief. I didn't know what else to do, and so I cried. I cried for the children whose ears have memorized the sound of drones, for the 10-year-old boy screaming as they carry his father's lifeless body, for Khalid Nabha kissing his granddaughter one last time before placing her in the ground, for the patients burned alive in their hospital beds, for the paramedics who were hunted like animals, on video apologizing to their mothers for not making it home alive. I cried until the tears stopped, and when the numbness came, the slaughter didn't stop. So sadness turned into rage. I was angry that Arab leaders sat silent, that my community failed to move, that the world watched a genocide and did nothing. Angry at war criminals with no accountability, at politicians who refused to see our humanity. I was angry, so I took to the streets, and I protested and I screamed in city halls, in the lawn of our universities, and even the libraries. You're not supposed to yell in libraries. Libraries are a place for studying. But how can I study when all the universities in Gaza have been razed to the ground? How can I study when my own university profits from a scholasticide? When my tuition and my taxes are fueling a genocide? This rage still lives on inside of me, but I've tried to carry it differently now. And so I turn to God and I pray. I pray for hope. I pray for his mercy on our martyrs, that he strengthens the souls of Gaza, that he gives them the justice for their transgressions, that he restores what they have lost. I pray that my Sido will see Ibna, that we all will return, not as guests, but as rightful heirs, that we will walk through olive groves, not under drones, but beneath the mercy of the sky. I pray Palestine will be free, not someday, but in our lifetime, my lifetime. Ameen, inshallah.
Thank you, Malak. As a proud Palestinian from a proud Palestinian family, mashallah, your experience and words are powerful. Next, I would like to invite our next poet, Dr. Shireen Nasr, an accomplished psychologist and an educator. Her research focuses on how to support the needs of diverse student populations. She is a leader in the Cleveland Palestine advocacy community, where she helps to build strong community through collective steadfastness. Please welcome her to the stage.
Hey, everybody. I'm still recovering from that last poem. I don't know about you, but it had me in tears. And I'm going to go off script for just a minute, if you all will let me. I'm an auntie now, so I can do that. I just really quickly want to say to Malek, who's down here, I always start off by saying I also am not a poet. That's not how I was trained. But in fact, we are all poets by necessity. That if you know anything about the history of Arabs before colonization, that poetry was actually how we uplifted ourselves socially. Every warrior had to know poetry, and that's how they rose in the ranks. Poetry is what we write when it burns so hard to keep the words inside. We are all poets. We should all be writing because that is how we survive. And if poetry was not dangerous, if the pen was not mightier than the sword, they wouldn't have murdered my uncle Kamal Nasser, my great-uncle Kamal Nasser, who was a Palestinian poet, and Israel found him and killed him in Lebanon. Poetry is power, and I really encourage everyone, I know it's hard to see yourself that way, but I encourage everyone to use poetry and to see themselves, Madak, as a poet. I'm going to read you 2 poems today. My first one is called, What Shall I Call the Nakba? While I slept, 50, maybe 100 more Palestinians dead. Tens of thousands decomposing bodies, robots targeting men at night at home with their families. But I'm not allowed to call it a genocide. Children's skeletal skin clings to porous bone. Childhood morphed into dark circles under her eyes. Her mother wraps her arms around her, says it'll be all right. But I'm not allowed to call it violent. Keys hung over heart, forced from our home, separated from our land once, twice, 3 times. But I'm not allowed to call it ethnic cleansing. A sniper points a rifle at a young girl's head, pulls the trigger, cheers as life leaves, as she joins her mother, her sister, her brother. But it's from the river to the sea that I'm not allowed to say. An occupier laughs as he kicks a man over and over. Imported settlers burn my grandfather's olive trees. They steal a man and brand their symbols on his forehead. But the rising anger, the pain, the scream in my chest is the terrorist. Imported seeds draw the last drops of water. Conform or die, slow body death of thread through cloth on feet dancing on ground. You rename the food our great-grandparents passed down, but it's not colonization. Walls high as hope, wide as dreams, segregate people from people, people from land. Children learn at checkpoints. They say the learning is a lie because it names the soldier hovering over their heads. But we're not allowed to call it apartheid. I read and I travel and I have degrees and names and words and I understand and I recognize and I learn and I lived, but I must be wrong. I'm told this is called self-defense. I live in an alternate reality. Every word a paper tiger. Blow gently like the flame on a birthday candle and it will fall. But if my words are false, then their world never existed at all. I have one more poem for you today. Oh, thank you. Lest the world think that Palestinians are nothing but a victim, because we are not. We are strong. We are Samud. Our culture teaches the world what it looks like to adapt and to live. My next poem is called, Have You Ever Met a Palestinian? Have you ever met a Palestinian? My Sida was one, a proud man, stubborn. We used to laugh that his head was harder than a rock. My grandfather loved the dirt like black coffee, thick, lush grains. As I reach out to pull a green bean off a stalk, I think of his short, stout fingers, using a twig to dig the dirt out of the grooves in his white tennis shoes. Have you ever met a Palestinian? My great-aunt was one. She taught English to all the village kids in the 1930s. She never married, never birthed a child, but had hundreds of children who called her Abla, Auntie, friend. She traveled the world, but she always came back home in the end. Have you ever met a Palestinian? Leila Khaled was one. She hijacked a plane so she could see her homeland one more time. Her family was displaced in 1948. She breathed in the scent of the bombs dropped on her home and breathed out the fire of decades of injustice. Have you ever met a Palestinian? You'll know if you have. We will immediately tell you that we are Palestinian. We will give you the shirt off our backs if we think you might need it for even a minute. We will laugh and cry at the same decibel, louder than a crack of thunder, louder than a stampede of elephants. We will feed you like you have never eaten before. Because you probably have never really eaten until you've sat at a Palestinian table. Once we have fed you, we will claim you as one of our own. If you've ever met a Palestinian, you will know, because we're a whole lot of drama and very little chill. Raucous with love, brimming with passion, endlessly resilient, stubbornly steadfast. If you've never met a Palestinian, you'll learn to clock one easy across the room. You'll know because the outline of who we are will tower into the sky and through the room. Before we even approach, you will know, because Palestine is not just the place we are from. It is our skin, our eyes, our hair, our breath, our hope. The light we use to fill a room, the song we use to drown out false prophets, the hope we use to build the whole world. If you have never met a Palestinian, when you do, you will know. If you look closely, you'll see the shape of a poppy in the iris of our eyes, the outline of a watermelon in the bridge of our nose. If you ever met a Palestinian, you will know. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Dr. Nasser. Just a second. That was really powerful. I mean, we got a 2-for-1 special. You know, I wasn't expecting 2 beautiful poems. For the next part of our program, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker. Dr. Rosemary Esber is an oral historian and an international development professional. She has conducted oral history projects about the 1948 Palestinian refugees, Arab Americans of the southern United States, and with Lebanese-American White House journalist Helen Thomas. Dr. Esber is the author of Under the Cover of War, the Zionist Expulsion of the Palestinians, and has published articles in various print and online journals. Her current research focuses on Eleanor Roosevelt and the Palestinians and North Africa during World War II. She was a Fulbright Scholar in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and a CAO-RC Fellow to Jordan and Lebanon, and an AIMS Fellow to Morocco. She earned academic degrees from the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies, the Johns Hopkins University Paul Nitz School of Advanced International Studies, and the Marietta College. Dr. Esber is a native of Canton, Ohio, and a resident of Alexandria, Virginia. Please give her a warm welcome.
It's okay. I'm going to change that.
Yeah, I'll change it for you. There you go. Clickers here should be on.
It's turned on.
There you go.
Thank you, Yassine. Good afternoon. I want to thank the poets for their very emotional presentations. They made me cry. And I'd also like to thank the Alexandria Library and especially Jen for her fantastic tech support. I may live in Virginia, but I'm 100% Buckeye. Ohio! It is always great to be home in Ohio. I would like to thank the Akron Palestine Solidarity Collective for inviting me today. I would also like to thank the Akron Summit Council on Nakba Education for organizing this event to mark the 77th year of the ongoing Nakba in Palestine. I am in awe of your accomplishments. You have worked tirelessly to make the Akron community and your elected officials aware of the catastrophic situation in occupied Palestine. As a result of your efforts, in November 2023, Akron City Council passed one of the first resolutions calling for a ceasefire and an end to the month-old genocide in Gaza. The resolution also called for an end to Israel's illegal occupation and settlements in Palestine, and for all parties to uphold international humanitarian law. The Akron Palestine Solidarity Collective also worked with the Summit County Council and the Fiscal Office to end the county's investments in Israel bonds in May 2024. Summit County was the first in Ohio and the first in the country to divest from apartheid Israel. Summit County elected officials have demonstrated moral courage and respect for the rule of law. Akron and Summit County, you have set an example for the state and the country. I will tell the Alexandria, Virginia City Council, be like Akron and Summit County, stand for justice and equal human rights. This presentation is based on my research in the British, United States, and United Nations archives, and the research of Palestinian, Israeli, and other historians. Because Palestinian documentary sources are scarce, I conducted over 120 oral histories with Palestinian survivors of the 1948 Palestine War, living in refugee camps in Jordan and Lebanon. I also conducted interviews in Virginia. I will share some of those testimonies with you today. Perhaps you have heard that Jews and Arabs have been fighting for 1,000 years, or that Palestine-Israel is a religious war between Jews and Muslims. Or maybe you have heard that the Palestinians have been trying to take the Israelis' land, or it's just too complicated to understand. Today I will cover over 100 years of historic events that led to the current catastrophic situation in Gaza and occupied Palestine. First, a definition. Zionism is a Jewish nationalist movement with the goal of establishing a majority Jewish state in Palestine through colonization. Christian and Jewish Zionists supported the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine. Most Zionists are Christians. Religious Jewish groups opposed Zionism in the late 19th century as heretical. Jews were the first anti-Zionists. Judaism is not Zionism, and to be anti-Zionist is in no way to be anti-Semitic. In June 1896, Theodor Herzl, the founder of Zionism, visited Constantinople, the capital of the Ottoman Empire. Herzl asked Sultan Abdulhamid to grant Palestine as a charter to the Jews. The Sultan replied, "I cannot sell even a foot of land, for it does not belong to me, but to my people." This was probably the very last time any foreign government would consider the property or civil rights of the Palestinians. Zionist Jews began to organize federations across Europe and the United States. They wanted to establish a Jewish state as a necessary safe haven from anti-Jewish attacks and discrimination in Europe. World War I caused major upheavals and political changes across Europe and the Middle East. To defeat the Ottoman Empire, the British enlisted the help of the Arabs. The British promised Sharif Hussein Arab independence over the occupied Arab territories of the Ottoman Empire, including Palestine. The Hollywood movie, Lawrence of Arabia, depicts the 2-year Arab revolt against the Ottoman occupation, but the movie exaggerates T.E. Lawrence's importance. Arab nationalists initiated and led the revolt for independence from the Ottomans. The British promise of Arab independence was in January 1916. Later that year, the British and the French secretly divided up areas of influence in the Middle East because they expected Ottoman defeat. This was the Sykes-Picot Agreement of May 1916. France wanted Lebanon and Syria, while Britain claimed Transjordan and Iraq. No one asked the inhabitants what they wanted. In fact, the indigenous people were deliberately ignored. As you can see, there's already a problem of conflicting territorial promises. The British kept making promises over the same territory, which they did not even own. In 1917, Dr. Chaim Weizmann succeeded in obtaining a British commitment from Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The British hoped that Jewish communities worldwide would influence their government to provide military support for the Allies during World War I, especially the United States and Russia. The 1917 British commitment to the Zionists to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine is known as the Balfour Declaration. Lord Balfour said, "In Palestine, we do not propose even to go through the form of consulting the wishes of the present inhabitants of the country." In 1917, Palestine was inhabited by about 500,000 Palestinian Muslims, 60,000 Palestinian Christians, and 60,000 Jews. The Balfour Declaration included the statement that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. Now, before the Balfour Declaration was issued, the British asked President Woodrow Wilson for his opinion. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis advised Wilson to support the Jewish homeland in Palestine. Wilson approved the text of the Balfour Declaration on October 6, 1917. After the Ottomans' defeat, British General Allenby entered Jerusalem in December 1917 and placed Palestine under martial law. The Palestinians protested the Balfour Declaration. They feared the Zionist European Jews would dispossess them. The Zionists never hid their ultimate goal. Polish-born Joseph Weitz wrote, "It must be clear that there is no room for both people together in this country. The only solution is a Palestine without Arabs, and there is no other way than to transfer the Arabs from here to the neighboring countries, to transfer all of them. Not one village, not one tribe should be left." In 1919, diplomats from more than 32 countries and nationalities met at the Paris Peace Conference to negotiate treaties and settlements after World War I. The Zionists had a direct role in shaping the post-war territorial settlements, but the Arabs did not. The League of Nations was established and the mandate system was created to govern the defeated German colonies and the Ottoman territories. Mandates were similar to colonies and framed as civilizing missions. Britain and France wanted to expand and secure their empires. They viewed the indigenous people in the Middle East and Africa as primitive, uncivilized, and fanatical. During the Paris Peace Conference, something unusual happened. President Wilson believed that for a permanent peace in the Middle East, the wishes of the communities had to be a principal consideration in selecting the mandatory power. The mandate power was supposed to develop the territory for the benefit of its native people. President Wilson sent the King Crane Commission to survey the populations in the Middle East and to learn their post-war wishes. It was the very first survey of Arab public opinion. The Palestinians wanted independence and self-determination. They were against Zionism, but if mandates were forced on them, they didn't want colonial Britain or France. The Palestinians wanted the United States to hold the mandate. They believed that President Wilson championed oppressed peoples. They knew all about Wilson's 14 points. Palestinians believed that the United States would be fair to all religions. They wanted a democratic constitution. They wanted American education. The Palestinians believed that Americans love humanity. The King Crane Commission report, which advised against the Zionist project, was suppressed until 1922. The Middle East mandates were awarded to Britain and France, generally according to the Sykes-Picot Agreement. The World Zionist Organization assisted in the drafting of the Palestine Mandate, which included the Balfour Declaration. The Palestinians had confidence in the rule of law and justice. They believed in the League of Nations. The world failed the Palestinians after World War I and would continue to do so. While Britain ruled Mandate Palestine, tens of thousands of Central and East European Jews immigrated under British protection and established settlements. The Palestinians' protests against unlimited Jewish immigration were continuous and often violent. The Palestinians feared being dominated by a foreign minority imposed on them by the British. Palestinian women participated in large demonstrations to protest the Mandate government's efforts to increase Jewish immigration. The Palestinian Women's Union was the first Arab women's group in the region. The union focused on opposing the Balfour Declaration, Zionist immigration, and British police violence. The British and American military warned that the Zionist program of transforming Arab Palestine into a Jewish state could only be carried out by force. Winston Churchill's attitude toward Arab resistance to colonial occupation was simply racist. He said, "I am strongly in favor of using poison gas against uncivilized tribes." The Mandate government continued to implement the British policy of establishing the Jewish homeland in Palestine, despite continuous Palestinian protests and resistance. After a significant lobbying effort by American Zionists, the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate passed a joint resolution endorsing the Balfour Declaration on September 21st, 1922. The resolution also stated that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of Christian and other non-Jewish communities in Palestine, and that the holy places and religious buildings and sites in Palestine shall be adequately protected. President Warren Harding signed the joint resolution. All branches of the U.S. government were early supporters of the Zionist settler colonial project in Palestine. In the mid-1930s, the Palestinians across the country revolted for independence and against British colonial rule and unlimited Jewish immigration. British forces crushed the revolt using harsh military force, executions, mass arrests, and home and village demolitions. The British imposed curfews, land confiscations, and economic sanctions on the Palestinians, which devastated their economy. The British also disarmed the Palestinians and exiled their leaders, contributing to the Palestinians' disadvantage during the 1948 war. David Ben-Gurion was head of the Jewish Agency, which was the Zionist government in Palestine. Ben-Gurion viewed war as an opportunity to deal with the Arab problem. Under Ben-Gurion's leadership, the Zionist European settlers continued military preparations with British assistance and training. Ben-Gurion was preparing for a decisive war to seize control of Palestine. When World War II ended in 1945, there were many problems to settle, including refugees, hunger, homelessness, destroyed infrastructure, border issues, reparations, and much more. Palestine and other colonial territories also needed to be resolved. The Jewish Agency petitioned the British government on May 27, 1945, to declare Palestine a Jewish state, which didn't happen. After the war, the United States was the most powerful country in the world, and so was the American president. The devastated countries relied on the US for economic assistance, and those countries were also heavily pressured to accept US policies. President Roosevelt died in April 1945. His successor, President Harry Truman, supported increased Jewish refugee immigration into Palestine. So did Congress, 48 governors, labor unions, churches, and many other organizations. American Zionists, US politicians, and the US media portrayed the Palestinians and all Arabs as a large, uncivilized, nomadic tribe following the Mohammedan religion. The 1926 Collier's New Encyclopedia defined Allah as the Arabic name of the supreme God among the heathen Arabs. Yet before the British occupation of Palestine, between 1904 and 1922, there were about 50 Arabic newspapers in Palestine alone. Yusuf al-Isa wrote in a 1920 editorial, "Palestine is Arab, its Muslims are Arab, its Christians are Arab, and its Jewish citizens are Arab too." The Arabs were also accused of using oil as a weapon to defy the Balfour Declaration and its promise of a Jewish state. Palestine did not have oil, and the British did not own Palestine to promise it to anyone. Soon after World War II ended, Zionist militias escalated their terror attacks against the British military, the Mandate government, and the Palestine police. The militias sabotaged trains, robbed banks, and British arms depots. They used drive-by shootings, bombs, and assassinations to force the British to leave Palestine. The British were much more restrained in suppressing Zionist terrorism than they were during the 1930s Arab Revolt. Even though the British were the Zionist main targets, Arab and Jewish civilians were also killed. Zionist terror disrupted daily economic life in Palestine, especially in the cities of Haifa, Jaffa, Acre, Tiberias, and Jerusalem. The Zionists bombed the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, which was the British government headquarters. Over 100 people died, British, Arabs, Jews, Armenians, and others. Funerals occurred every day. Edward Maroum, a Christian Palestinian I interviewed, compared the trauma evoked in Palestine to the terror created by the 9/11 attacks on the United States. The Palestinians refused to be governed by Zionist terrorists. Nonetheless, Zionist terror achieved its goal. The British public demanded that the British withdraw from Palestine because the cost to taxpayers and the mounting British casualties. The British wanted the United States to take more responsibility for Palestine. When Truman refused, the British handed the Palestine question over to the newly formed United Nations. Palestine was the first real test of the United Nations' ability to prevent war and to keep the peace. Because of the Holocaust, there was international support for a Jewish state in Palestine. The United States and other Western countries had closed their borders to thousands of Jewish refugees seeking asylum. From 1933 to 1945, the United States only accepted about 200,000 refugees, mostly European Jews. In 1947, Congressman William Stratton of Illinois sponsored a bill to immediately admit 400,000 European refugees. The Zionists publicly denounced the bill, killing it. They wanted Jewish refugees only to go to Palestine. President Truman and Congress were pressuring the British to immediately accept 100,000 European Jews into Palestine, which is about the size of New Jersey. And despite the protests by Palestinians and other Arab states. In 1947, Palestine was populated by an estimated 1.3 million Arabs and 640,000 Jews. 2/3 of the Jews were recent European immigrants living mainly in cities. The Jews owned about 6.5% of the land. Over 60% of the Palestinians were farmers living in hundreds of towns and villages. The remaining Palestinians lived in the cities. They were teachers, doctors and nurses, musicians, artists, merchants, and religious leaders. The indigenous Muslims, Christians, and Jews had always worked and lived together in harmony in Palestine. The United Nations General Assembly recommended partitioning Palestine into an independent Arab and a Jewish state with an international zone around Jerusalem. The Palestinians were more than 2/3 of the population, yet the proposed Arab state was only 42% of Palestine. The Jews were assigned 56%, including the Negev Desert, which was 99% Palestinian inhabited. In fact, the Palestinians were the majority population in both proposed states. The partition recommendation meant sovereignty, not land appropriation. The UN partition did not give the Zionists any land. Military conquest does not confer lawful sovereignty. The Palestinians viewed the UN partition resolution as unfairly dividing their homeland and forcing them to pay for the European Holocaust. They feared that the Zionists would try to acquire all of Palestine, which was the Zionist stated goal. The Palestinians and Arab countries protested partition at the United Nations, but they were ignored. The British colonial secretary said the Arabs just did not exist and their views were hardly considered. The Truman administration pressured, threatened, and bribed other UN member states to obtain the necessary 2/3 majority to pass the UN partition resolution. President Truman was thinking about the 1948 presidential election, not world peace or justice. War in Palestine was predicted by the British and the US military. The British partition of India in August 1947 resulted in civil war and over 1 million people killed. with an ongoing conflict between nuclear India and Pakistan. The UN General Assembly's vote in favor of partition sparked fighting between the Zionist Jews and the Palestinians on November 29, 1947. In early December, Zionist militias went on the offensive. Palestine was swept by terror. By January 3, 1948, Palestine's main cities, including Haifa, Jerusalem, Jaffa, Tel Aviv, and Tiberias, were battlegrounds. The British did little to stop the escalating violence. To establish the Jewish state, the Palestinian population had to be greatly reduced. The Zionists accomplished this by deliberate and systematic intimidation and military violence. The British commander in northern Palestine observed that one of the goals of the Zionist operations was to terrorize the Arab population and force them to leave. By late March 1948, British forces had been largely withdrawn from Palestine. Zionist forces unleashed Plan D in April to seize strategic territory and expel the Arabs. Can you still hear me? Yes, thank you. The Palestinians understood that the British would not protect them and they could not protect themselves. The following are eyewitness testimonies I collected from Palestinians living in refugee camps in Jordan and Lebanon. Aziza Nababti from El Kebab, a village of 2,300, said, "The villagers feared the Jews would kill their young and rape their daughters. People feared for the honor of their women. They took over everything. 2 or 3 days after the Jews left, some people came back to the village, gathered the bodies of the dead in the mosque, and buried them. Even old men were killed. Those who were wounded, they killed them. 2 to 3 days after we left, those who stayed in the village were shot. The Palestinians who could not flee, the elderly, wounded, disabled, or sick, were killed when Zionist forces occupied their villages." Zakia Abu Hamid from the small coastal village of Ramla Zaita said that Jewish forces blockaded the village for about 2 weeks. The 200 villagers had no food left. They huddled, frightened in their homes. Abu Hamid said, "The Jews attacked and started going into people's homes and forcing them out. They told us, 'You either leave or we will kill you.' She said some people were killed along the roads as they left their homes." The town of Beisan had a population of 6,000. Zionist militias laid siege to Beisan at the end of April. Although Beisan surrendered, most of the Palestinians were driven on foot across the Jordan River. Masusi al-Nakash said her mother refused to leave until the Jews started killing people inside their houses. "They killed my neighbor by beating him with a gun. They killed his sheep and took them. They gave my uncle 2 choices, leave or be killed." As the Palestinians fled Beisan, they passed 3 checkpoints on the road. And Nakash said the Jews stopped them and took their money and gold. The most notorious event of the war was the Zionist massacre at Deir Yassin near Jerusalem. Over 100 Palestinian civilians were murdered in April 1948. Sheikh Mahmoud said the Jews entered the houses, raped women, and machine-gunned young people. It was a horrible massacre. Reports of the killings and mutilations, and especially the degrading treatment and rapes of Deir Yassin's girls and women, spread panic among the Palestinians. After Deir Yassin, the Palestinians increased their demands for the Arab League to send troops to Palestine to protect them. Deir Yassin was not the only massacre or the worst. Zionist forces used the same tactics against the Palestinians living in the major cities of Akron, Haifa, Jaffa, Safed, and Tiberias, all before the British departed on May 15, 1948. Zionist forces drove the Palestinians farther from their homes and beyond the borders of Palestine. The Palestinian human and financial losses during the war were huge. By May 15, Israelis were able to seize and control the main cities, airports, seaports, government and military infrastructure, utility stations, warehouses, and tens of thousands of Palestinian houses, businesses, and buildings. The Palestinian-American academic and comedian Amir Zahir said, "The Israelis actually stole a fully furnished place." The Palestinians tried to return to their homes and lands, but could not because of Israeli tactics. These included laying landmines, demolishing villages, burning harvests, killing or stealing livestock, looting and destroying homes and businesses, shooting returnees, and taking prisoners. The transformation of historic Palestine went beyond expelling the Palestinians. Zionist forces had orders to destroy the villages, erasing the memory of the Palestinians' presence on the land. Ancient historic homes, mosques, churches, schools, and graveyards were desecrated and destroyed. Whole villages were erased overnight. All these actions terrorized the Palestinians and prevented their return. The Zionist violence was systematic and targeted against civilians to force them off their lands. About 84% of the Palestinians expelled were children under 15, pregnant and nursing mothers, the elderly, and the sick. It was a war against civilians, like the ongoing genocide in Gaza and ethnic cleansing in the occupied West Bank, East Jerusalem, Syria, and Lebanon. Even the British were appalled by the Zionist attacks on the Palestinians. General Cunningham, the last High Commissioner of Palestine, said, "In the end, it was clear that it was the Jews who were trying to frighten the Arabs and to drive them into the sea. They were being pretty ruthless in their attacks, and it was clear it was being done by conscious design." On July 12, 1948, the Israelis attacked the neighboring cities of Lid and Ramle, massacred civilians in the mosque, and expelled approximately 70,000 people after robbing them of their valuables. The Israeli soldiers forced city people into the hills by shooting at them. The Palestinians walked toward Ramallah for 3 days in 100-degree summer heat and the evening cold, without food or water. "They drove us out of Lid like a herd of cattle," said one man. Odeh Rantisi, a Palestinian Christian, was 11 years old. He later estimated that 4,000 Palestinians died alongside the road in what he called the Death March. Rantisi said, "Many pregnant women miscarried, their babies left for jackals to eat." Yusuf Farsa had just graduated college and was starting his career. He witnessed the Palestinians from Lid walking up the rocky hills to his town of Beer Zait on the West Bank. Families from major Palestinian city took refuge where the villagers stored dried figs and under the olive trees. This is what he saw in 1948.
But when the Lid was kicked out, people from Lid kicked out. Lots of them came to Ramallah, to Bir Zayt, and so forth. There was hardly any places to put the people. We just mentioned the place where we stored the teen and all that. All these rooms for everybody was filled with people. And so people started staying underneath the olive trees in the center of Birzeit. Birzeit was full of them. Eventually they went to other places or stayed in Birzeit.
The people from Lid, they weren't Falahin, they were...
No, they were Madaniya, but they had difficulty. We walked out to meet with them. But
Do you want to take a break? You okay? Do you recall?
it is,
Go ahead.
it's not just that event itself, but my reading about it and things of the sort is worse. It makes it worse. These people were coming up the hills. The hills that we have are not gentle. They have lots of small stones and things all over the place, and they had thorns, thorny things by them and things. And people were carrying their kids and carrying bundles of things with them. And so people would meet them with some water and things.
Like all Palestinians, Yusuf Farsa still carried traumatic memories from the Nakba. The majority of Palestinians were expelled while Britain was responsible for maintaining law and order in Palestine. The fighting escalated into the first Arab-Israeli war after May 15, 1948, when Israel declared statehood and neighboring Arab countries sent troops into Palestine to protect the Palestinians and their homeland. Palestinians call the 1948 war a Nakba, or the catastrophe. By the end of the war in January 1949, the State of Israel was established on 78% of Palestine's land, from which most of the Palestinians had been forcibly removed. The Israelis expelled over 800,000 Palestinians from 531 cities, towns, villages, and Bedouin communities, and banned the refugees' return in violation of international law. But the Israelis had not yet reached their goal of a greater Israel without Palestinians. Israel imposed military law on the estimated 130,000 Palestinians who were able to remain within the State of Israel. The Israelis restricted the Palestinians' movements, enforced curfews, and required special permits to travel. Palestinians faced discrimination in employment, ongoing land and water theft, and second-class citizenship in their own homeland. The military government could torture and detain Palestinians without trial and restrict their political activities. Palestinians attempting to return to their villages were shot on sight or imprisoned. During the June War of 1967, Israel again used terror and the cover of war to expel another 300,000 Palestinians from the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. Israel deliberately bombed towns, refugee camps, and fleeing families. Israel also destroyed 244 Syrian villages and farms and expelled 130,000 Syrians from the Golan Heights, which Israel still occupies. Palestinians in East Jerusalem were expelled in mass evictions. The Israelis destroyed ancient neighborhoods to clear the area for Israeli settlements. Military orders banned Palestinians from returning to their homes and lands. Palestinian activists and community leaders were systematically arrested. For many Palestinians, this was their second expulsion. During the 1967 war, the Israeli Air Force also deliberately attacked the USS Liberty in international waters, killing 34 Americans and wounding 171 sailors. There has never been a full U.S. government investigation of the deliberate Israeli attack on the USS Liberty. Israel has killed other Americans with impunity, including Shireen Abu Akleh, Rachel Corrie, and Alex O'Day. Under Israeli occupation, Palestinians continued to lose their lives and their homeland to illegal Israeli settlements, discriminatory Israeli laws, a devastated economy, brutal military occupation, and a system of apartheid, according to the United Nations and Amnesty International. Palestinians from the occupied West Bank were not allowed on the streets of Jerusalem after dark without risking arrest. Many Palestinians were forced to rely on UN aid. The first Palestinian Intifada began in December 1987 at the Jabaliyah refugee camp in Gaza. It was a widespread, popular, nonviolent uprising against Israeli occupation. Palestinians used nonviolent protests, civil disobedience, and strikes in local communities. Palestinians engaged in boycotts, demonstrated, and refused to pay taxes, while Israeli occupation forces responded with curfews, mass arrests, violence, and restrictions on Palestinian movements. The Israeli government tried to forcibly suppress the uprising through military crackdowns, house demolitions, and deportations. Defense Minister Yitzhak Rabin famously ordered his soldiers to break the bones of Palestinian protesters. Over time, the uprising led to high-profile peace negotiations. The Oslo Accords established the Palestinian Authority and gave Palestinians limited self-government in parts of the West Bank and Gaza. The Israeli violent suppression of the mostly nonviolent Intifada led to the emergence of militant Palestinian factions, including Hamas. The Israelis did not conquer the area of Palestine known as the Gaza Strip in 1948, but 75% of the 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza are refugees from the 1948 war and their descendants. Israel has waged 15 devastating wars against Gaza, targeting civilians, refugee camps, and critical infrastructure in an area the size of Philadelphia. In 2007, Israel imposed an illegal 16-year land, air, and sea blockade on Gaza, making Gaza unlivable by 2020. According to the United Nations, Gazans could not travel for cancer treatments, students could not leave for scholarships, and Israel prevented medical supplies, building materials, fuel, food, water purification, and much more from entering Gaza. Gaza lacked clean water, employment, sufficient food, medicine, housing, or hope, even before October 7, 2023. Since the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel, the Israeli military have forcibly displaced over 2 million people. Israel continues to indiscriminately bomb Gaza, destroying the civilian infrastructure and the 4,000-year-old world heritage of Gaza. Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Israel has transformed the Gaza concentration camp into an extermination camp, while the world watches in horror as the Palestinians in Gaza live stream their own genocide. No place is safe in Gaza. There are over 46,000 orphans. They could almost fill the University of Akron Stadium. The Israelis have forced the Palestinians into a smaller and smaller area and then continue to bomb and starve them. Israel's legacy will forever be genocide, apartheid, and brutal occupation. The Israelis have taken the opportunity of the genocide in Gaza to violently attack and expel Palestinians from the West Bank and East Jerusalem, destroying whole civilian areas and refugee camps. Israel has also forcibly displaced and destroyed villages in southern Lebanon and southern Syria, confiscating land and destroying homes and killing over 3,000 Lebanese and dozens of Syrian civilians. Palestine, Israel, was always about the land. The Palestinians owned the land. The Israelis wanted the land, but not the Palestinians. The Israelis took the land in 1948, expelled the Palestinians, and continue taking Palestinian lands, resources, and homes by force, and expelling the Palestinians from their homeland. Israel has been able to act with impunity because of the support of successive U.S. governments for over 100 years. But Americans are increasingly learning the truth about Palestine. President Dwight Eisenhower said about Israel in 1956, "We cannot support one nation at the expense of our own principles. Our commitment must be to peace, not unconditional support." The Biden administration was a full accomplice to Israel's ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity. Israel sent its wish list of weapons to Washington, D.C., and the U.S. taxpayer footed the bill. Or, as the chant goes, Israel bombs, USA pays. Not even ChatGPT knows if Israel got $26 billion or $30 billion from Biden. And Trump recently expedited nearly $12 billion in military weapons to Israel. Both administrations violated the Leahy Law, which prohibits U.S. arms sales to any country using U.S. weapons offensively. The Memorandum of Understanding that guarantees Israel $3.8 billion in annual U.S. military aid paid for by American taxpayers was signed by President Obama in 2016. This agreement covers 2019 to 2028 and is the largest military assistance package in U.S. history. Senator William Fulbright said in 1973, "Israel controls the U.S. Senate. We should be more concerned about the interests of the United States than the interests of Israel." Israel doesn't just control the Senate. Through its political contributions, many Ohio politicians represent Israel's interests instead of their constituents and the United States' interests. Israel's political influence extends to the state and local levels, and even to the boards of education. Akron taxpayers contribute over $14 million to Israel annually, and Ohio taxpayers contribute $469 million of the $3.8 billion given to Israel annually for weapons. Those tax dollars could be much better spent in Ohio communities. Despite this very painful history, I am hopeful. There's a growing momentum toward Palestinian liberation, even among the ongoing genocide in Gaza and Israel's impunity in Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen. The Palestinian liberation movement is one of the largest international social movements of the decade. The world has witnessed unprecedented support for Palestine with mass protests, advocacy campaigns, and increased media coverage of the Israeli genocide, apartheid, and occupation in Palestine. People who have never protested before are protesting for Palestine. Despite immense suffering and losses, Palestinians continue to demonstrate unwavering resilience, refusing to be displaced as they continue their struggle for justice and liberation. The boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel is growing and having an impact. Some governments and international organizations are calling for accountability and sanctions against Israel. 146 of 193 UN member states now recognize the state of Palestine. The International Court of Justice ruled that Israel is committing plausible genocide. The court also ruled that Israel must end its occupation, dismantle settlements, provide reparations to Palestinian victims, and facilitate the return of displaced people. The ruling also condemned Israel's policies that violate international prohibitions on racial segregation and apartheid. Palestinians and their worldwide supporters have a renewed determination to end Israel's occupation. Palestinian Jewish solidarity is increasing. Students and professors have led the way in protesting genocide. They have paid a high price for their moral courage. Please support our students. I know that was a lot of information for a Saturday afternoon. Just remember one Palestinian farmer. He said, "Our problem is very simple. A foreigner came and took our land, took our farms and our homes, and kicked us out. We have in mind to return." Congratulations, Akron and Summit County, on your inspiring achievements for justice and human rights. You are leaders in the change we need for our country. Thank you, and free Palestine.
Thank you, Dr. Esper. Who here learned something new? Raise your hand. Justin, you might want to take a look at those hands. There's a lot. They put them down. Okay, put them back up. Thank you. That's amazing. I, for one, also learned a lot from this presentation. There were things that I didn't know about the United States' complicity in the ongoing Nakba from as early as the 1920s. That was something that was new to me. And truly, when we arm ourselves with knowledge and the truth, not only are we more protected against the lies that are spread constantly, but we are also in a greater position to advocate. So everyone here who has been given this knowledge, you are now required to do something with it. With that said, we have one more item on our program to round things out before we close. And of course, as always, it is important to hear the voices of Palestinians. So I would like to invite to the stage someone who would like to share his story, his family's story of the Nakba. Perhaps the youngest member of the Akron Palestine Solidarity Collective, Nasser Osman, would you be able to come up to the stage? Please give him a warm welcome, guys.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today. And I want to give a thank you to the Akron Summit County Library for recognizing Nakba Remembrance Day and for giving us the space to remember, reflect, and speak the truth. My name is Nasser Osman, a fellow junior at Walsh Jesuit High School, and it means so much to me and to countless others that this day is recognized here, because remembrance is the first step to justice. A Nakba, meaning the catastrophe in Arabic, holds a very deep meaning to me. It's the story of my family, and it's the reason why I'm standing here today as a Palestinian American, born far from a land my family still dreams of returning to. Because of the Nakba, my father was born in a refugee camp in Lebanon. He was able to eventually leave and come to America in search of a better future, but that's not the story for most Palestinians. Many never had and still don't have that chance. On the 15th of May, 1948, over 750,000 Palestinians were violently expelled from their homes. Entire villages were wiped out. More than 500 villages were destroyed or depopulated, and families just like mine were forced to flee on foot to neighboring countries, such as Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. It was not an organized evacuation. It was chaos and panic. People fled forcefully under the sound of gunfire with no food, no plan, but more importantly, no idea if they'd ever survive or return back home. My dad's father, my grandfather, was 10 years old when the Nakba happened. He and my mom's grandparents resided in Nazareth at the time. My mom's father, my other grandfather, was only a few months old during that tragic day. In the confusion and fear of fleeing, my great-grandmother, desperate to protect her newborn son, briefly placed him under a tree, thinking she had him with her as she ran. Only after some time in the midst of the stampede of terrified families did she realize that she wasn't with her while she was running. And after yelling out to her kids, "When Ali? When Ali? Where is Ali? Where is Ali?" she turned back in a panic and, by the mercy of God, was able to find him again. My family, like so many others, ended up in Lebanon, completely displaced with nowhere to go. There were no houses waiting for them, nor any welcoming hand from the government, just tents, dust, and the trauma of what they had just escaped. Over time, Palestinian families were scattered across refugee camps in Lebanon, where little did they know that future generations would soon grow up in poverty, with no citizenship and no rights as deserved. But despite this, my grandfather, my mom's dad, refused to give up. As he grew older and saw the ongoing injustices Palestinians were constantly faced with, especially the refugees in Lebanon, he dedicated himself to helping his people. He became the deputy officer in UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, working for northern Lebanon. Over the course of his career, he had helped move displaced Palestinians into refugee camps, organized food distribution, issued Palestinian identity cards in the country, and played a major role in opening grade schools for Palestinian children. He was also in charge of the teachers and made sure that education was a priority and a source of strength and dignity for Palestinians, even in exile. His father, my great-grandfather, never let go of hope. He kept the key to their home in Nazareth, carrying it with him through the Nakba all the way to Lebanon, which now remains with my family today. It's not just a physical object, it's a symbol of hope, a symbol of resistance, and a dream that one day we will return. But tragically, that home in Nazareth no longer stands. Israeli forces demolished it, and it is now taken over by illegal settlers. However, knowing this, we still choose to keep the key, because to us, it represents our true home and the belief that truth still matters. And we must connect this truth to what is happening today in Gaza. What many people don't realize is that over 2/3 of Gaza's population are not originally from Gaza, rather they are descendants of those expelled from other parts of Palestine during the Nakba. So when we see families in Gaza bombed, displaced, and starving, we are merely seeing the continuation of the Nakba 77 years later. Today, the death toll in Gaza is rising every day. According to Al Jazeera, over 61,000 civilian deaths have been confirmed, meaning people who were able to register a death certificate. This does not include the several thousands of lives lost under the rubble or have never been found. Over 120,000 people have been injured by Israeli forces. The majority of these victims are women and children, including thousands of babies who have never even made it to the age of 1. Entire neighborhoods have been flattened. Hospitals and schools, which were used as shelters, have been flattened. The number of journalists killed in Gaza is more than the number of journalists killed during World War II, the Vietnam War, and the Iraq War, all combined. More than 21,000 children have become orphans, many of them trapped under the rubble or unlawfully separated from their families and placed in Israeli prisons. These numbers are not statistics. They represent lives, families, and communities that have been devastated, all in a tiny strip of land less than 1/3 of the size of Summit County. They represent a human catastrophe unfolding in real time, one that demands the attention and action of the world. I myself and more than grateful to have been blessed with the education and opportunity, things that millions of Palestinians will unfortunately never be able to experience, most especially in Gaza, where people are trapped under siege, cut off from the world, and being destroyed by one of the most powerful militaries on earth. They have no escape, no security, and no future they can plan for, just survival day by day without ever knowing if they will make it to the end. That's why this day, Nakba Remembrance Day, matters. We remember it not just to honor the past, but to fight for the present, to speak up for those who can't, to remind the world that what is happening in Gaza today is not a new story. It is the continuation of the one that began in 1948 and still has not ended. I ask you all, don't let today just be a day of remembrance. Let it be a call to action. Talk about Gaza, stand with the displaced, demand an end to the violence, support organizations that are providing aid. And above all, never forget that this is not just a Palestinian issue. It's a human issue, because when entire families are wiped out, when children are orphaned by bombs that are being sponsored by our tax dollars, when people are stripped of their homes, dignity, and future, our shared humanity is at stake. If we truly want a world that is built on justice, dignity, and peace, then we must care about Gaza, and we must care about the Nakba. Thank you.
Thank you, Nasser. Last but not least, I would like to invite Akron local, a Palestinian advocate who has been very vocal at the Akron City Council meetings, helping us pass the ceasefire resolution, Brother Walid Abu Khalid. Would you please come up to the stage? Please give him a warm welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I had written something down based on a request. Basically, I interviewed family members, my parents, my father, and my mother, who are Nakba survivors. And I also see other Nakba survivors. I'd like to take a moment just to recognize these individuals. If you could please stand up so people can recognize you. Abu Walid, Abu Ramzi, anyone else? I don't need this to tell the story. It's better to be saying at free will and impromptu. I did not live during the Nakba, but I relive it on a daily basis. Interviewing my father and my mother, I see the pain and I feel the pain. Both parents came from affluent background families. Both of my grandparents had orchard farms. My maternal grandfather was one of the most affluent Palestinians of Kufr. The map of Kufr, which is approximately 10 kilometers east of Jaffa. Of course, in English, they refer to it as Jaffa. This is a family portrait of my mother's side, my uncles, my aunt, and my mother standing to the far right. This is post-Nakba where they were displaced and relocated to a refugee camp near Al-Bire. My father, to this day, recalls the pain as a 3-year-old. On May 15th, 1948, as the chaotic bombardment began, they were uprooted from their home. And he recalls that his older sister, about the age of 12, I believe, carried him on her shoulder. And as they walked past the town's well, a bomb landed about 60 meters to where they were walking. And he recalls vividly looking over the shoulder of his sister, seeing a woman, a middle-aged woman, and the expression in Arabic cannot be communicated in English. I'll say it in Arabic first. كانت تتفعفل. In English, the term that closely describes this is a broiler. A broiler. كانت تتفعفل زي الدجاجة. A broiler. When a chicken is slaughtered, dismantled, and frantically twirls and twerks as the nerves are in action. This is what he witnessed as a 3-year-old. He describes how they went into the marsh area where they grew wheat. He said, when I stood, the wheat overtook me, so people couldn't even see me. And that's where they stayed for days on end, until his father decided that we need to evacuate. And of course, their home was a family communion. It was something that not only housed his immediate family, but his uncle's family as well. That's the traditional Palestinian familyhood. It was not just one household. Everybody lived together. The kids grew under a family communion. My mother was only 6 months old, but she lived through 2 Nakbas, 1948 and 1967. Of course, from one refugee camp to another refugee camp. She describes how her father, my maternal grandfather, and I'm sorry if I'm going over, had a tractor that was valued at 5,000 Palestinian dinars in 1948. If you do the calculations based on inflation, and of course if you do a Google search, nothing comes up because we have to replace Palestinian with just a general dinar. It comes out to roughly $26 million. They had a area that was in the back of the home, which was basically a warehouse stocked with goods of fruits and vegetables, open to the entire community. People can come and go as they please without having to ask for permission. That's the sense of community, and I'm sure this was quite relevant with most Palestinians. And I will not be political, but I'm just trying to state the facts. My father's family ended up living at his father's tomb, where he was buried in a mausoleum for months on end. Imagine living in a graveyard, in the elements. And then other family members would take them in. But of course, he describes it like We had no water, we had no food, we had no money. So yet we got displaced once again. And eventually, it got so desperate, they had to leave Palestine and make their way east to Amman, Jordan. And he was orphaned at the age of 3, and by the age of 12, he was orphaned once again when his mother died. So, and there was no one to support him. And by the age of 14, he had to be a man. He made his way to Kuwait. He learned the trade. He was deprived of the education. But he made a pledge to himself that one day when he has a family, that he will afford the education to his children, the very education that he was deprived of. He always wanted to be a surgeon. He loved math and science. And he knew well that his children, growing up in the Middle East, would never be afforded that opportunity. And therefore, in 1978, he said, it's time for us to move again. And that's why we immigrated to the United States, so that his children can thrive. And I'm glad to pronounce that his children were afforded that opportunity, 4 of which have a minimum of a master's degree. Not to gloat, but his dreams and aspirations of affording this opportunity to his kids came true. I thank my father. I thank my mother. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Brother Walid. It's through the storytelling that we continue on the voice of Palestinians over and over again, year in, year out, through the families, through our communities. This is how we keep our movement alive. We center it around the Palestinian voice and the Palestinian story. I myself, my parents are from India. My mom was raised in Kuwait. My roots go up to Afghanistan. I am not Palestinian. But at the same time, like Dr. Nasser said, if you eat at a Palestinian table, you're a Palestinian. So I am Palestinian. I am Palestinian. I still remember the day she cooked bamia and rose for us, and I was working on phone banking at her house. This is community. As the chant goes, in our millions, in our billions, we are all Palestinians. And I think we are. Anyone here who loves justice, who loves freedom and peace, is a Palestinian. And in that joint Palestinianness, are we going to reach our goal of freedom for Palestine? When we hear about the things that we've heard about today, we are moved, our blood boils, and we wonder, what can we do? What is a way where we can act on this knowledge, on this zeal that we have in our hearts? What can we do? And so this is my great transition into a few announcements that I want to make. 4 things that you can do in the immediate or near future for Palestine. When I say immediate future, I mean in an hour from now in Cleveland, there's a protest taking place at the Beit Hanina Cultural Center. And this is at 5 p.m. in North Olmsted. So if you're able to make it, that is fantastic. That is one way where you can take this to the streets. Second, NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, an imperialist organization, is coming to Dayton to meet. So there will be a People's Assembly for Peace and Justice taking place on May 25th. And we have a bus departing from Akron to take people there. So if you're interested in that, please sign up. We also will be holding a Nakba film screening. If you want to learn more about the Nakba, if you want to understand more about the Palestinian story, there will be a film screening at the Islamic Society of Akron and Kent in collaboration with the Palestinian Youth Movement. Last but not least, Dr. Esber made mention of a recent victory to divest from Summit County's Israel bonds. However, that is not all of it. There is still more bonds remaining that have yet to mature, and they mature in the month of August. So, throughout these next couple of months, make our presence known at Summit County Council. Please continue to show up. If you haven't already, then make sure you show up with extra noise. Show up and make your voice heard. Those are a few ways where you can show your passion about Palestine and help make the movement advance. With that said, I would also like to acknowledge a few organizations and a few people. Of course, the Akron Summit Council on Nakba Education and Remembrance, and the Akron Palestine Solidarity Collective. Please, by all means, scan the QR code, follow us on Instagram so that you can stay in touch and join the community. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Zeki Mediterranean Street Food and Digital Graphics and Signs, for helping support this event through providing desserts and as well as, of course, documenting this beautiful, beautiful event. I would also like to thank our speakers. Many of them, took time out of their busy schedules to be here and to help support and to share their amazing insights. So thank you all so much. And of course, thank you to all of you who took time out of your day on a Saturday to listen to such heavy material. I see people from as far as Youngstown, as far as the east side of Cleveland. All of you are filling up this room because you love Palestine, and that's what matters. With that said, I obviously mentioned these earlier, but these are the flyers for the upcoming events. Feel free to snap a picture. I really would like to see all of you there. And with that said, I would like to close off this program by inviting you to partake in some refreshments outside, some desserts. And again, thank you, and free Palestine. There is one thing. I almost forgot. Two things. First of all, Dr. Esber was kind enough to donate 4 of her signed books to the Akron Palestine Solidarity Collective so that we can offer them for purchase. Each book is $100 each. It is a signed copy, and this is on Under the Cover of War, the Zionist Expulsion of the Palestinians. We have 4 copies here, so get them before they go. And last but not least, Akron Palestine Solidarity Collective has launched its own merchandise. We have t-shirts for sale outside. They're $25 each. Please show your support. It really goes a long way. Thank you so much.